2-year-old boy in his own bed. Police initially thought it might have been a horrific accident, that he'd been caught in the crossfire. And then the Jackson police chief stood in front of the cameras and said something that changed the entire direction of the case. Kamari Givens was not caught in the crossfire. He was targeted. Police arrived at the scene on Queen Alexandria Lane in Jackson, Mississippi on a Saturday night in late June. After a call reporting a serious assault, they found 3 bodies. In the house with Kamari, 2 women also didn't survive. All 3 had been targeted inside their own home in an ordinary residential neighborhood. The question was no longer what happened. The question was, who deliberately targets a 2-year-old and why? The 2 women were Kiana Weathersby, 25, and Erica Weathersby, 30, sisters. Kiana was Kamari's mother. Erica was his aunt. 3 generations of the same family. The weapon used, police later confirmed, was a rifle stolen from law enforcement itself. 4 people would be arrested for this case, across 2 states. But the biggest question, why Kamari, still has no answer. Let's be clear from the start. This is an active, ongoing prosecution. All 4 suspects have been arrested and denied bond, but none have been convicted. Under US law, they are presumed innocent until a final court verdict. The criminal psychology framework discussed in this video is general and theoretical, not a diagnosis or a conclusion about any specific individual in this case, all of whom remain presumed innocent. This content is based on verified news reporting and official police statements. The house on Queen Alexandria Lane sits in an ordinary residential neighborhood of Jackson. Around 10 p.m. on a Saturday night in late June, police received a call reporting a serious assault. What they found when they walked in, according to Chief Brackney, was a horrifying scene. The Hinds County coroner confirmed the identities of the 3 victims, Kiana Weathersby, Erica Weathersby, and Kamari Givens. Both sisters had multiple gunshot wounds to the head and upper body. Kamari was found on his own bedroom, in his own bed. These were Jackson's 41st, 42nd, and 43rd homicides of the year, but the single incident the city's police chief called the most severe violence she witnessed all year. Then came the line that reshaped the entire case. Kamari was not caught in the crossfire. He was a target. In so many cases of violence that claim a child's life, one of the small mercies for a grieving family is knowing the child was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Here, even that isn't true. Suspects fled the scene in the red Mitsubishi Mirage belonging to one of the victims. The first sign that this wasn't simply a killing, but one accompanied by theft. The car turned up abandoned at Manhattan Park in North Jackson, just a day later. No one inside. It became a second crime scene. Fingerprints, DNA, anything that could be directly tied back to a suspect. But the lead that actually broke the case open didn't come from a lab. It came from the people of Jackson. Thanks to numerous public tips, police identified a second vehicle connected to the suspects, spotted on Highway 18. The driver refused to stop. A brief chase, and then the car was surrounded. 2 men stepped out, Cornelius Carter and Jordan Carter. Both 28, unrelated despite sharing a last name. Both were charged with capital murder. Cornelius Carter faced an additional charge of felon in possession of a firearm. The third was Michaela Young, 25, the one driving that car. According to investigators, she knew beforehand that the 2 men intended to commit a robbery, but according to her own statement, she left the scene the moment she heard gunfire. She was still charged with capital murder, a detail we'll come back to in the legal section ahead. Around the same time, another discovery sent the case in an entirely new direction. The rifle used to kill all 3 victims had been stolen from law enforcement itself. 3 suspects in custody, 1 still at large. This person left Mississippi, traveled more than 500 miles to Forney, Texas. Once the case crossed the state line, it was no longer solely Jackson's PD's jurisdiction. The U.S. Marshal Service stepped in, working alongside Texas State Police and the Kaufman County Sheriff's Office. The suspect was identified as Devon Edward Montecure. The arrest happened without incident. No gunfire, no chase, no one hurt. In an ordinary residential neighborhood in Forney. Not hiding in the woods, simply living hundreds of miles from the crime scene. Montecure was extradited to Mississippi 2 weeks later. His charge sheet was significantly longer than the other three. 3 counts of capital murder, auto theft, felon in possession of a firearm, aggravated assault, and 1 charge that becomes important in the legal section ahead: burglary of an occupied dwelling. He was denied bond. All 4 of them are now in custody. Chief Brackney has confirmed the case remains under investigation and has referenced additional persons of interest. Now, before we go further into the legal and psychological analysis, this video needs to pause on what matters the most. 3 people who lost their lives. The sister's brother, DeMarco Bailey, has spoken for the family through these painful weeks. He described his sisters in simple words: kind, hardworking. Not flowery language, just a plain truth of how these 2 women lived. Kiana and Erica weren't just sisters. According to DeMarco, they raised Kamari together, a household where both mother and aunt shared the work for caring of him, building a life together for that child. And that child was only 2 years old, at an age where most of what a child knows of the world is his mother's arms, his aunt's voice, and probably a few favorite toys in the very room where he was found. When DeMarco Bailey told reporters, "I just need justice, not only for my sisters, but my nephew," that wasn't a line rehearsed for the cameras. That was the voice of a man who had just lost 3 family members in one night. On July 11th, the family held a joint memorial service for all 3 victims. 1 service, 3 caskets, 3 generations of the same family laid side by side for the last time. Now, this is the question anyone following this case keeps asking. After committing a crime like this, how does a person still drive hundreds of miles, abandon a car in a park like it's a piece of trash, and keep living in an ordinary neighborhood in Texas, to the point that, when arrested, there's no visible sign of someone in crisis? Investigators have long noticed a recurring pattern in serious cases like this one. Some suspects continue functioning almost normally after the fact. In criminal psychology, this is often discussed under the concept of compartmentalization, the ability to separate an action and the emotions tied to it into distinct mental compartments, so one doesn't collapse the other. Part of them took part in an act of violence. Another part kept operating like a completely ordinary person. This isn't a sign of feeling nothing. Many researchers describe it as a psychological survival mechanism. When faced with an act that exceeds the mind's normal capacity to process, it tends to shut the door on that part in order to keep functioning. This needs to be stressed. This is a general criminal psychology framework, not a diagnosis or a conclusion about the specific motives of any suspect in this case, all of whom remain presumed innocent while the case proceeds through the courts. That's one of the reasons cases like these always draw the attention of investigators and psychologists alike. Sometimes behavior after the fact doesn't reflect what outsiders expect it to. This part takes a little bit of patience, but it's key to understanding why all 4 suspects, including the ones who never pulled the trigger, faced the single most serious charge in Mississippi's criminal code. Under Mississippi's code, section 97319, the charge of capital murder doesn't only apply to killings that are clearly premeditated, calculated in advance. It also applies under something called the felony murder rule. That rule states, if a death occurs while an individual or their accomplice is engaged in committing one of a specific list of serious felonies, including robbery, burglary of an occupied dwelling, kidnapping, rape, or arson, that death automatically constitutes capital murder, regardless of who directly caused it and regardless of whether that person intended to kill anyone at all. This is exactly why Michaela Young, who wasn't at the scene when the shots were fired, who drove away the moment she heard gunfire, still faces the same capital murder charge as the two men who allegedly fired the weapon. Under Mississippi law, prosecutors don't need to prove Young intended to kill anyone. They only need to prove she knew about and took part in the plan to commit the underlying felony. In this case, robbery, and that a death occurred during that felony. This is also why Devon Monacure's charges include burglary of an occupied dwelling, not just murder and auto theft. Adding that charge suggests prosecutors may be building an argument that the burglary itself is the underlying felony establishing the felony murder rule for everyone involved. Now, what's interesting and legally controversial about this rule is that it allows someone to face the highest level of criminal responsibility, including the death penalty or life without parole, even when their role in the chain of events leading to a death was indirect. That's precisely why Mississippi law also recognizes certain mitigating factors at sentencing, including cases where a defendant was merely an accomplice in the capital offense committed by another person. Maybe their participation was relatively minor. This is one of the arguments a defense team could potentially use if they wanted to emphasize Young's limited role in the case. That even though she knew about the robbery plan, her role was driving, then leaving the moment things spiraled out of control. This is the kind of argument that often surfaces in felony murder cases where a defendant is said to have played only a limited part. It's not an argument guaranteed to spare her the harshest sentence, but it could influence a jury's decision at sentencing, should the case get that far. By contrast, for Cornelius Carter, Jordan Carter, and Devon Monacure, the individuals police describe as more directly connected to the scene itself, the legal weight they face leaves almost no room for a minor role argument, especially with Kamari confirmed as a deliberate target rather than a crossfire casualty. A detail prosecutors could use as a significant aggravating factor in any future trial. One notable detail uncovered during news coverage: Cornelius Carter is not a stranger to the criminal justice system. According to records cited by WLBT, Carter was indicted in April 2015 for striking 3 Jackson Police Department detectives with a vehicle. While being held on the assault charge, he was further charged with attempting to escape from the Hinds County Detention Center and causing damage to the facility. This detail, while it doesn't directly prove anything about the current case, raises a familiar question in many criminal cases. When an individual already has a documented history of violent and law enforcement directed behavior, what did the criminal justice system do to monitor, intervene, or prevent the risk of escalation to something more severe? This isn't an accusation. Cornelius Carter, like the other 3 suspects, remains presumed innocent until proven guilty in this case. But this history is part of the public record, and it's a detail that's been cited in the news coverage of the case. Jackson Mayor John Horn spoke out shortly after the case became public. This behavior is a bad stain on all of the good that is going on in our communities. We will not accept violence as a way of life in Jackson. He also pledged, we will continue working every day to ensure that everyone responsible is brought to justice. For DeMarco Bailey, the prayer is simpler: justice. Not just for his 2 sisters, but for the 2-year-old nephew who never got the chance to grow up. Let's talk about the questions that are still open in this case. 1. What was the real motive behind the attack? Police have confirmed this was a targeted attack, connected to a planned robbery, possibly alongside a burglary of an occupied dwelling. But why this house? this family was targeted, and specifically, why Kamari was deliberately targeted rather than spared, has not been disclosed yet. 2. Did the suspects know the victims beforehand? This is a question police have declined to answer publicly. 3. How and when was the stolen police rifle taken? This is a separate investigative threat, potentially involving individuals entirely different from the 4 suspects already arrested. 4. Will more suspects be charged? The police chief has referenced additional persons of interest, but hasn't confirmed whether that will lead to further charges. 5. How will the court ultimately weigh Michaela Young's actual role? 6. Does the additional burglary of an occupied dwelling charge against Montecure reflect a different prosecutorial strategy for each suspect? In his own bedroom, in his own bed, a 2-year-old boy used to fall asleep every night, trusting it was the safest place in the world. That's the image this case leaves behind. Not a statute, not a charge. A child's bed in his own room. 3 lives lost, 4 people awaiting trial, in 2 different states, under the single most serious charge Mississippi law allows. But the question no trial can ever fully answer is the one DeMarco Bailey carries with him every day. Why his nephew?